Boston Bruins. A special hello goes out to the Director of Media for the Boston Bruins alumni, Mr. Marco Aaron. Nice to meet you, Marky.
Welcome to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, the voice of hockey legends. This show is created to give a voice to former pro players and personalities, allowing them to share some of the greatest stories this game has to tell. So let's take a trip to the heart of the classic hockey universe and celebrate the history of the game with the select few who actually lived it. Goaltender Denis Herron is our guest on episode 61 of the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast. From 1972 to 1986, Denis played 14 NHL seasons, which included 3 stops with the Pittsburgh Penguins, a trial-by-fire stint with the expansion Kansas City Scouts, and 3 solid campaigns in Montreal, where he won both the Vezina and Jennings League trophies. We cover a lot of ground with Denis, and he tells great stories about former teammates, coaches, and GMs. Denis also reveals which player was, in his words, the most talented player by far he's ever played with. And just a hint, it's not Mario Lemieux or Guy Lafleur. We greatly appreciate all of you who have subscribed, rated, and reviewed the PHA podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. You have helped make the show more visible to fans across the world. In fact, we are now ranked among the top hockey podcasts in the US and Canada. If you haven't already, please rate and review the show. We greatly appreciate your support. Remember, home base for the show is prohockeyalumni.org. Reach out anytime with comments or suggestions. The Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast is joined with NHL alumni Tom Laidlaw, Frank Simonetti, and Ken Hodge Jr. in support of the Warrior for Life Fund and the Navy SEALs Foundation. Through the game of hockey, the Warrior for Life Fund supports our Warriors by providing programs and infrastructure that helps military families from all service branches cope with the unique challenges of combat, extended deployments, disabilities, and the long-lasting effects of war. The Warrior for Life Fund honors the history and heritage of military service and those who have unselfishly given the ultimate sacrifice. Please visit warriorforlifefund.org for more information. Now, let's talk classic hockey with Denis Herron. Well, it's a real pleasure to have on the show today one of the great NHL goaltenders of the 1970s and 80s, 3 times with the Pittsburgh Penguins, also a Vezina Trophy winner, a Jennings Trophy winner, and a stalwart goaltender with the expansion Kansas City Scouts. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's Denis Herron. Denis, thanks so much for being with us today.
Pleasure is mine.
Denis, growing up in Chambly, Quebec, I was curious if you were a Montreal Canadian fan and if you patterned yourself perhaps as a youngster after some of the great Canadian goaltenders like a Jacques Plante or a Gump Worsley.
Definitely when you grow up, let's say Montreal, in the suburb of Montreal, you always have the Montreal Canadiens, especially with my family. We're a big hockey fan family, and every Saturday night we're watching hockey on TV, and definitely Montreal Canadiens was definitely the number one in our family. And Jacques Plante was pretty much somebody I was looking into it definitely because I was a goaltender very early age, and I was trying to, let's say, copy somebody, and I think I was trying to do this for Jacques Plante.
Not that many youngsters decide to be a goaltender right off the bat. You know, I talked to Phil Meir recently, who kind of was talked into it at an older age. What was your fascination with goaltending at a young age? What about it attracted you to being a goaltender?
Well, that's it's not a question of attraction. It's a question. I came from a very, very small town in the suburb of Montreal, called Chambly, Quebec, and my dad was a goaltender, and he was a coach also. And in Chambly, we had 2 teams. I also, in the next city beside Chambly was Port Chambly, who had two teams also, and one team in Richelieu. And because we came from a very, very small town, we were probably 3,000 people, let's say, in the late 50s. They didn't have enough people to play goal, or, as my dad said, you're going to be a goaltender. And I started playing pretty much at the age of 4 or 5 years old with kids at 10 to 12 years old. And that's the way I became a goaltender.
Well, you obviously succeed at it. I guess it's good to have a father as a coach, too, to help you along. And you end up with Trois-Rivières in junior hockey in the Quebec League. And that was kind of almost unofficially had a relationship with the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time. Talk to me a little bit about that junior hockey experience, how you ended up there, and just talk about that experience in general, playing junior hockey in Quebec.
Well, what happened in Rivers, when I was approximately, 15 years old, let's say in April of, I presume it had to be 1966 or 67, a gentleman from my hometown came to me, my brother, and 2 or 3 other guys, and said, I have a friend of mine who is the coach in Three Rivers, and if you want to go practice with the junior team, they are going to start the playoff very soon and give you a chance. And we went and we practiced. We had 2 practices with the junior A team. The summer passed, and I presume in August, I received a letter from Three Rivers and asking me if I want to come down for training camp to try with the junior A team. And I was the only one who could receive a letter. And by then, my dad had passed away and everything. My mom said, well, try it and see what happens. Like, I went to Three Rivers, didn't make the team, but the team asked me if I want to be the third goaltender. And right beside Three Rivers is a small city called Cap-de-la-Madeleine. It's a junior B team. And they said, we're going to put you there, and we'll call you up once in a while during the season to give you some experience. And that's the way I started there.
Well, you have a strong junior career, which leads to you being selected in the 3rd round of the National Hockey League draft, 1972 NHL draft by the Pittsburgh Penguins. And you actually have a rare distinction because you go to training camp with the Penguins in 1972. You have a strong camp and actually make the team as a rookie, which is unheard of for a goaltender. And you had a strong start with a pair of shutouts, one against the Islanders, one against Vancouver. But taking it back to the training camp, Denis, you're a young guy. The Penguins have a veteran team. I believe Red Kelly was coaching at that point. You got a lot of veterans, Brian Hextall and Sillaps, Lowell McDonald, guys like that, Ron Stackhouse. So what was that first camp like for a young guy like yourself, especially as a goaltender?
Well, it was interesting because I didn't know to speak English also. You had the guys by Jean Pronovo who was there, and pretty much Jean Pronovo was telling me everything what to do because I didn't understand English or speak English at all. For the first 2 weeks, pretty much Jean Pronovo was my guys that everything the coach said, or I was following him like very, very closely because I didn't understand what the coach was saying or what drill to do and everything.
Right.
But on the other hand, that helped me because I did just concentrate on my hockey. And don't forget, at that point, too, when I turned pro, I weighed pretty much 145 pounds. only.
Right.
And I was fast, and that helped me a little bit.
Well, you're one of those rare individuals who had to work on gaining weight rather than losing it, and we'll get into that in a minute too. But as I said, you had that strong start with Pittsburgh. They decide that you need some more experience. You end up in, of all places, Salt Lake City for a little while in the Western League, and of course, here and there in Hershey. But eventually, you get traded to the expansion Kansas City Scouts, and that's an opportunity for you. I guess it depends on how you look at it. Opportunity for you to really establish yourself as a full-time goaltender National Hockey League. On the other hand, it's a team that's an expansion team and maybe a little bit short on talent at that point. What was your reaction on getting traded to the Scouts, and what was that experience like playing for a team that struggled to win games?
Well, what happened, that was my third year that I was with, let's say, Pittsburgh, and they had sent me to Hershey. And I barely play in Hershey also because I think I was no longer figure in their plan in Pittsburgh. And the two goalie, a goalie in Pittsburgh got hurt, and they came to me. They said, "Then you have to go up to Pittsburgh because I think it was Jimmy Rutherford or somebody got hurt." And I went down to Pittsburgh, and the first game that we were playing in Pittsburgh, and I was the backup goalie. And I think the second game, we went to Atlanta, and the coach came to see me, and he said, "You're going to play tonight." I said, "Fine." I said, "Gee, that's the time for me to shine because definitely it's a break for me." Did the warm-up and everything, and right after the warm-up, coach came to see me and said, "We decided you're not going to play." Got really upset, but what else are you going to do? Like I said on the bench, pretty much everybody in the stand, referee, everybody knew that the trade was made. That's the reason why I didn't play, and even my wife, who was at Montreal at that time, find out before I find out myself.
Oh.
Because the game finished at 10 o'clock, and I think the announcement in Montreal and the TV was at 9:30.
Wow.
And right after the game, the coach came to see me. He said, "The reason you didn't play because you got traded to Kansas City." Got to Kansas City. Sid Abel was the general manager, and I think at that time he was not there. And Baz Bastien was there as the assistant GM. I met with Baz Bastien, walk in. Mr. Bastien said to me, he said, "I lost a very, very good goalie, as Michel Place." Mm-hmm. He said, the only reason I lost him because he said, "I cannot afford him. You are pretty cheap, and we decided to go with you, and hopefully you're going to do the job." Okay, and go get dressed and go play. That's the story when I got to Kansas City.
Quite a motivational speech there by Baz Bastien.
That's right.
But nonetheless, you do take advantage of this opportunity. I had a conversation recently with Gary Smith, and we talked about his days playing with the Oakland Seals, and he would get so discouraged at the end of a season. He would face so many shots, there'd be so many losses. He almost, as he said to me, he almost had a nervous breakdown after one season. My question for you, Dennis, you had a stretch there where I think the team won 1 out of 44 games. You're playing well. I mean, you lead the league in saves. You're playing a lot. You play 60 games. Is it difficult under those circumstances to keep your focus when you go on a road trip, let's say, and you've got Boston, New York, Philadelphia, whatever, and you're losing consistently? Is it difficult for a goaltender to keep focused each night, or is that not a problem for you?
It was not a problem for me. For me, I saw this as a chance to prove myself, lots of shots, and pick up experience And I said to myself, well, see where that's going to get me. And definitely it was experience. Also, my coach at that point, pretty much I was playing the game. He didn't want me to practice because I was playing so many games. Like when I used to practice pretty much half an hour a day, 45 minutes the most, compared to an hour and a half for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like just to keep up with the resting and just keep myself sharp enough just for the game. And that's the way I play. Definitely, for me, was a great advantage to play in Kansas City because I picked up so much experience and helped me with my career.
Sure did. Now, one of the things we talked about earlier is that you had playing all those games and being relatively thin to begin with. As I recall, and I think it was mentioned in the Kansas City Scouts book, you tried various methods of keeping weight on. And one of them was, I think you were drinking a lot of protein shakes at the time, which ended up creating some complications for you. Is that true? And if so, could you tell me about that?
Yeah, what happened is one of my best buddy when I played in Kansas City was Gary Croto. And Gary Croto was a big boy.
Oh, yeah.
Lifting weight and everything. And Gary was very, very strong and pushing himself all the time. Like during the summer, me and him, we stay in Kansas City. And what we did, I trained with him. And he tried to, for me, he said, let's try for you to gain weight a little bit. Like we work out pretty much 4 or 5 hours a day.
Wow.
Running, lifting weights, all kinds of stuff, bicycling, playing tennis, everything, almost every day. So what happened too in Kansas City, if you know the weather, it's pretty much 90 to 100 degrees during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
By pushing ourselves, by especially me, because I was drinking not one milkshake, I was drinking pretty much 10 blender a day of milkshake. And what that caused? That caused too much calcium in my body, mm-hmm. and where I developed kidney stone that way.
Oh, that's painful.
Yeah. And that was the story about the milkshake and the way that I tried to gain weight. Eventually, I got stronger that way also, but it was okay. It's just I drink too many milkshakes, that's all.
All right. Well, listening to your training regimen with Gary Croto, you guys were way ahead of your time with your weightlifting, running, and et cetera. So that certainly helped you. Now, when the Scouts fall at the end of the 75-76 season, they moved to Colorado. You decide not to, and you end up back in the Steel City with the Penguins. Can you tell me how that all transpired?
Well, Kansas City went to Colorado. I don't remember the GM who was in Colorado at that time. But I received a phone call in the end. They said to me, Denny, we're not interested in your service. You're a free agent. You could go anywhere you want to go. And that's the way. And when I talked to my agent said, it's you have the choice to go to Vancouver or to go back to Pittsburgh. And because I knew the city in Pittsburgh, like the adaptation for my family, my wife and the kids, mm-hmm. Was going to be a lot more easy if I go back to Pittsburgh. And Baz Bastien was there also as the assistant GM. I decided to go back to Pittsburgh. That's the way.
Yeah, and I'm surprised. Colorado always had challenges with their goaltending, And I'm surprised they didn't take the opportunity to bring you along. You had such a strong 75-76 season with Kansas City, and I'm surprised they didn't. But their loss was the Penguins' gain. Again, you return to Pittsburgh. You're sharing duties in 76 and 7 with Dunk Wilson. Kind of an interesting character. I don't know much about him. What was it like splitting time with Dunk? What type of guy was he?
Well, Dunk gets to Pittsburgh really is what happened right at the beginning of the season. I got injured. I broke my arm.
Mm-hmm.
And I got hit by a skate right in my arm, and I broke my arm. Like Pittsburgh was desperate to get a goalie, and I presume Dunk was playing in New York, and I think they made a trade for him. I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, Dunk Wilson came to Pittsburgh and played very, very, very well for Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, he's a different character, great
Right.
gentleman. And Dunk, like I said, played very, very well. I got along very, very well with Dunk. On the road, he was my roommate. And what we decided, I think at that point, Kenny Schinkel was our coach.
Yeah.
And I came back mid-December, I presume. And we start to split game, but Dunk won, me won, and we start splitting like that. And I started playing very, very well, and Dunk was playing very, very well. Well, since I was getting along very well with Dunk, he played well against some team, and I played well against some team. But we sat together, made our schedule, let's say from January 1st all the way down to the end of the season, and said, and present that to our coach and said, we like to play those games. He played well against some of the team, and I play well. And Mr. Schinkel said, fine. If you like to go like that, that's fine with me.
Wow, that's great.
And we win until pretty much until March, like that. And Dunk got hurt. And I finished the season playing pretty much every game there. And that was my experience with Dunk Wilson.
Well, you posted a stellar 2.94 goals against average, and the next year you become the certified number one goaltender, playing 60 games with the Penguins. And some interesting teammates that you had there. You had a veteran team, of course. And I wanted to ask you about a few of them. Number one was a very underrated defenseman in those days named Dave Burrows. Can you tell the fans a little bit about Dave and what he brought to the Penguins team?
Well, Davey Burrows, in these days, hockey was still a bit different. And definitely with Davey Burrows in front of you, goaltender during this era, the 70 and 80, played very, very well or communicate very, very well with your defenseman. And you practice and you said, okay, if we have a situation 2-on-3, you do this, you do that, or I go here and you go there. With Davey Burrows, you know that the guy was not going to pass Davey Burrows. Mm-hmm. It was so easy to play, to be the goalie with Davey Burrows in front of you, that you know exactly what to do. You know the guy was not going to pass by Davey Burrows. Like most of the time, the guys had to shoot, and if you're ready, it was very, very simple. But Davey Burrows was pretty much one of the best defensemen I played for in my career.
Right, he was underappreciated. And I think one other defenseman who sometimes the fans were impatient with, but could really move the puck, and he was a big guy, but he wasn't overly physical, was Ron Stackhouse.
Right.
What's your recollection of Ron as a player?
Ron Stackhouse is pretty much exactly the same thing. A little bit different than Davey Burrows. But with Ron Stackhouse was a big boy, and definitely nobody was in front of you, in front of the net. and that was helping me also. It was a little different style of from David Burrow, but definitely having those two guys in my team, it make my job a lot more easy.
No question. Now, there are two guys I wanted to ask you about who were very colorful characters in hockey. I'd love to know your thoughts of them as teammates. And the first of all was the left wing Brian Spinner Spencer. Of course, he's no longer with us, but quite a colorful character. Can you tell us a little bit about Spinner Spencer?
Brian, he was really a guy that worked very, very hard. Tell you, if you have a guys like that in your team, and you were struggling a little bit, when Spinner went on the ice, he tried to shake up things and have your teammate go and say, okay, if Spinner can do that, we can do that, and it was good that way. Spinner was not a guy that was going to score 50 goals, but he had a role to play in the team, and definitely it was a pretty good guy to have in your team.
And one other player I wanted to ask you about when you talk about guys who have a role, of course, in that era, the most feared enforcer would be Dave the Hammer Schultz, who ends up in Pittsburgh. And what impact did it have? Did his arrival have on the team? I mean, did it allow the skill guys to play a little bit more freely with him on the ice? And what type of impact did Dave Schultz had at that point of his career with the Pittsburgh Penguins?
Well, definitely, when David came to Pittsburgh, it was a little bit later on his career, but definitely have Schultze on our team was a great asset, like you said. Help other player to, let's say, play a little bit more freely because they know if something happened, Dave Schultz was there to defend them. And I think that helped us quite a bit. And David was a great gentleman also. Like it was a great asset to our team, definitely.
I talked most recently to Dennis Marouk, and one of the Penguins missed the playoffs of this year in 77-78, as did the Cleveland Barons. Now, he talks about how proud he was to play in the World Championships. And as I was talking with him, as a fan, and I grew up in New England, outside of Boston, you didn't get a lot of coverage of the postseason World Championships, and some of the greatest players in the world of the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia. And, of course, you represent Canada in 1978 in a bronze medal team. Talk a little bit about that experience and the pride of playing for your country.
Well, definitely playing for your country is completely different. It's a little different, and also you try to win that gold medal, because really, if you win that gold medal, you are the best team in the world. When we play, I presume at that time was Daniel Bouchard was the goalie with me. Like we play one game here, one game there. And with the teammate that we had, pretty much was like a all-star team that you play with. And those players, even if we didn't practice that much together, I tell you right now, to have those players in front of you was pretty good. Czech Republic, Russia had very, very good team. But Canada was pretty awesome also. Definitely, we won the bronze medal, but we could have won either way and win the gold medal. Were just a few bad luck or few bad break here and there, but overall, we did play very, very well.
Either way, a great experience, and you come back in 78, 79 with another strong season, playing 56 games. was curious now, in your second time in Pittsburgh, now I lived in Pittsburgh for 5 years or so in the mid-'90s when I worked with the Penguins. But I was curious, at that time, hockey in Pittsburgh was, the fans were great, they had a good core, but still there was some financial instability with the team here and there. And my question is, what was the hockey scene like in Pittsburgh then compared to what it would be now?
Completely different. Definitely, when you play for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the, let's say, in the 70s and mid 80s, pretty much you could do anything. They were talking football or baseball quite a bit. Hockey was the third sport in Pittsburgh. Now, hockey is the number one sport in Pittsburgh,
right?
And you're talking football and baseball after. I guess it make a big difference. And you're talking the Mario Lemieux era, and I think Mario changed the whole concept of hockey for the Pittsburgh fan, and that has been like that since he got there in 1986.
Right. Yeah, it was 84, and the impact he had as a player and then as an owner all these years later is it probably never has happened before in sports to have that impact for that long. But as I said, in 78, 79, the Penguins are an improved team. You have another strong year, and then it's off to the playoffs, and you're playing a good Buffalo Sabres team in round one, those 3-game series they used to have. It's a team with a lot of firepower, and in the end, the Penguins prevailed in Game 3, an overtime goal by George Ferguson. Had to be a fun experience for you, playing in a high-intensity series like this and coming out on top.
Yeah, definitely. That was probably the best series I ever played in the playoffs. Buffalo were the underdog, pretty much 100-1. Mm-hmm. And but like I said before, I play well against some of the team, and Buffalo was one of the team I played very, very well, especially in Buffalo. I don't know if it's because the ring was a little bit smaller than any other rink in the league, but I played quite well during that series. And finally, at the end, George came up and had a goal in overtime, and that was quite a joy, really.
Well, things are going real well for you in Pittsburgh, and things are getting better for the team. So wouldn't you know, you get traded. But you don't get traded to just any team. You get traded to the hometown Montreal Canadiens, just off of 4 Stanley Cups. How did you hear about that trade? It had to be a surprise to you.
It definitely was a surprise. And I'm a guy that is not very emotional when it comes down to hockey. For me, it was, okay, I'm playing hockey, I play net, and I'm going to do the best I can. And I got traded to Montreal, and I found out really what's playing for, let's say, Pittsburgh or Kansas City versus playing for Montreal, because in Montreal it was like no private life, because everybody knows you. You cannot go shopping with your wife because everybody will stop you. Lots of pressure because every fan are your coach. It was completely different.
It had to be
different.
And it also had to be a lot of pressure, too, because Ken Dryden had retired, of course, in the off-season. So did Jacques Lemaire and Yvan Cournoyer. Things really changed a lot in Montreal. So for yourself coming in, as you said, you're under the microscope. One thing that's interesting, a little piece of trivia for our fans, is Guy Lafleur scored 50 goals 6 times in his career, and 3 times he had the 50th against Denis Herron. He couldn't do it that year in 79 because you were teammates. Can you talk a little bit about Guy Lafleur, number 10 of the Montreal Canadiens?
Well, definitely Guy Lafleur was pretty much one of the best players in the league. Like I said, and I remember pretty well, reporters were asking me how I feel about Guy Lafleur scoring his third time 50 goal. And like I said to everybody, it's not my fault if he's waiting for me to get in town to score his 50 goals.
Right.
But I tried to stop him as much as I could. And finally, he definitely scored his goal. But that was it's a great record for him, and I'm proud that he scored against me because definitely my name will be in the books for that.
Right. Well, you were part of a great company who were gave up a goal to Guy Lafleur, of course, which is pretty much everybody who played. And one other guy you have a unique perspective on is Pierre LaRouche, who you had a chance to see at 3 different stages of his career. That you saw him, towards the beginning, a little bit as an opponent with Kansas City. You saw him as a teammate in Pittsburgh, and then, of course, in Montreal. In that first year at the Canadiens, he's a 50-goal scorer. Kind of an interesting guy as well. But what are your recollections of Pierre LaRouche?
Pierre LaRouche, okay, and I said that when I was playing, and I will say that again. Pierre LaRouche, talent-wise, was probably the most talented hockey player that I ever saw play in NHL.
Wow.
So much talent, it was incredible. The difference is that Pierre was a non-talent. He took hockey not as seriously as a Gretzky, who didn't work as hard as a Lafleur or Gretzky or some of the other players. But talent-wise, Pierre LaRouche had the most talent that I ever saw as a hockey player.
Wow, that's an amazing statement from a guy who's seen pretty much everybody in that generation. For yourself, Dennis, you win the Vezina. Next year, the Jennings Trophy in your 3 years in Montreal. Your first year, you lead the league in save percentage. In your third year in Montreal, you lead the league in save percentage and goals against average. The challenge in Montreal may have been for you. Now it was Rick Wamsley, Richard Sevigny, Bunny Larocque. Was it frustrating having 3 goalies consistently in the mix? Whereas in Pittsburgh, in KC, you were able to kind of run with it, play 50 or 60 games. Was that a challenge for you to play among two other goalies?
Well, what happened is the first year that I was in Montreal, right at the beginning of the year, I broke my collarbone, I presume, in late October. And Bunny Larocque came in and played, and Bunny didn't play as well as people were expecting. I came back in mid-December, I presume, or late December, and I started playing quite well. But I think I lost 2 games out of 32. And that helped me adjust the Montreal style and everything. Mm-hmm. The following year, they traded Bunny Larocque, and all of a sudden, they decided at training camp to have 2 other goalies as a backup also. Like it's Denis Herron, Richard Sevigny, or Rick Wamsley, and we just go back and forth. And it was a little bit harder to adjust. Mm-hmm. And not playing as much also. And different style and everything. Okay, that was an adjustment, and it was a bit harder for me that way, definitely.
Well, you had a tremendous amount of personal success with Montreal, and of course, you get traded back to Pittsburgh for the 3rd time. You're a Pittsburgh Penguin, so I guess that's good. You're familiar with the area, and you're familiar with your team. What was your emotion like getting traded from Montreal to Pittsburgh, a team that was really starting to struggle at that point?
But definitely was was quite nice to when they announced to me, and I was at training camp. I had no idea. I was at training camp in Montreal, and I was on. The general manager came to see me. He said, "Denny, we just traded you back to Pittsburgh, and the only condition I had to sign a contract in Montreal before I went to Pittsburgh."
Mm-hmm.
That was the condition that the trade was going to happen because Pittsburgh didn't want to negotiate a contract with me. Like I said, fine, no problem. Like my agent, myself, we sit down and negotiated a contract with Montreal, and I went to Pittsburgh and play. Like you said, it was easy because I knew the city, I knew the player, I knew quite a bit of people. Like it was a easy adjustment to get traded to Pittsburgh for the third time.
And your head coach there is Ed Johnston, of course, longtime National Hockey League goaltender, assistant coach, a good friend of mine who spends a lot of time up here in New England, Mike Corrigan. But the team is in the rebuilding mode, so you're kind of back into a situation you were earlier in your career. You're seeing a lot of shots, a little bit of a loose defensive approach to the team. And that changes, as you noted earlier in the conversation, in 1984 when Mario Lemieux joins the Pittsburgh Penguins. So you've got a unique perspective of Mario. You're a French-Canadian player, as is he, of course. He comes into training camp, and I was curious about your observations of him as an 18-year-old player.
Well, definitely Mario came in, and with the structure, first of all, he's a big man. Like when you saw him coming for the first time, definitely you knew it was Mario Lemieux.
Right.
With Mario, is what happened is it was an adjustment for him also to go from junior hockey to the NHL. I could say it took him probably 2-3 months to adjust to the NHL. But when the adjustment was made, watch out.
Right.
He was going to be the player. And definitely he proved that he was the player in the league and also in Pittsburgh.
So in your last year, you play a little bit for Pittsburgh. You play most of your games in Baltimore, as did so many past and future Penguins. I just want to get your memories, if you can think back to one of your teammates that a lot of our fans are familiar with from the movie Slapshot, Steve Carlson. And do you recall Steve as a player and as a teammate?
Yeah, definitely. Steve was what you saw in Slapshot and what you see Steve as a player. It's completely different, but definitely a great gentleman, great guys, lots of fun, good hockey player, very, very good leader as a team, and definitely Baltimore. He made things happen there. Mm-hmm. Definitely, Steve was, if I'm not sure, I think he was our captain, something like that. Mm-hmm. And definitely, it was a good leader there.
Dennis, you've at this point had a successful 14-year career that comes to an end in 85-86. Are you ready to retire at that point, and what was the adjustment like? Now, you spent a lot of time in hotels as a hockey player. You ended up in that industry, but what is it like that first year, 1986, out of hockey for the first time and forever in your adult life, and making that transition to non-hockey life?
But what happened is after that year, I played from January until April in Baltimore. After that, Pittsburgh said to me, we are thinking to resign you, and but that's not going to happen until late summer of that year. That was after the season. Like I said, fine. I said I will wait and we'll go from there. And I think they picked up some goalie at the draft, and came down August they came to me and they said, as a team, we made a decision not to resign you, and thank you very much. And because it was August and most of the team had made the thing happen or made draft choice, or it was too late for me to find a job with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like I decide with my wife as a family to retire, and that's what we did that year.
So that time period after you retire, like I think you were in the auto sales business for a little bit, but you end up having a great career in the hotel and tourist industry. Can you talk a little bit about perhaps the skills and the discipline that you had to have to play Major League Hockey and how that transferred over to a successful career off the ice?
Well, definitely, when you're a hockey player, you are very disciplined, and you have to work very, very hard at it. And my first year in the hotel business, I came to West Palm Beach area. A gentleman from Pittsburgh, who was the general manager of the Hyatt Hotel in Pittsburgh at that time, had asked me to go in the hotel business during one summer, and I told him, because I was playing hockey, I was not going to think about another job until I retired from hockey. And I retired from hockey, and he finally got in touch with me, offered me a job in West Palm Beach, Florida. When came here as the, let's say, 34, 35-year-old gentleman, and to a new business that pretty much don't know very much about.
Right.
I stay all my life in a hotel, but never on the other side on the other side. And all of a sudden, a gentleman who was my boss as a director itself was only 21 years old.
Wow.
And I was 34 years old. As a person, it was because I knew the management company, I knew all the people at high end. He was afraid a little bit of his job.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said, you want to learn the job? He said, you're going to make some phone calls and you're going to work hard at it, and that's the way you're going to learn. I said, fine, that's no problem. When I showed up for my first day in my office, I had box from the all the way down to the ceiling, full of files. And those files were people that stay at our hotel for the previous 30 years.
Wow.
And he said, you're going to call everybody and you're going to ask them to see if they want to come to our hotel. And that's the way I learned the hotel business. I called people, they were dead for 10 years. But I call and learned the business that way. And I learned, if you want the business, you have to go after the business and you have to call. And definitely that's the way I learned how to become a better hotelier that way.
Right. And also as a human being, it's humbling. A lot of people don't want to maybe take that step to learn from scratch after having such a successful career. Now, obviously, I'm assuming the money was much less than when you got started, so you're able to persevere.
Oh, yes.
But, it takes a lot, it says a lot about a person who's able to make that step. And again, you get a pile of boxes and a bunch of files, and you just start dialing. And nothing glamorous, but it paid off for you. You had a heck of a career. I'm curious, do you still hear from fans? Do fans still send you things to get autographed and things of that nature?
Oh, yes. I get approximately 3 to 4 letters every week to sign autographs. It's funny because yesterday I just sent one to Czechoslovakia. a fan had asked me to sign some pictures that they had, and they were from Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
And I got them. Another one, I think 2 days ago, was from San Antonio, Texas.
That's great. Well, the fans don't forget. And I remember we had a celebrity alumni reunion back in the mid-'90s with the Penguins. I had a chance to meet you briefly, and I said to myself, he's a great guy. I hope to get a chance to catch up to him. And on today's show, I did, and I'm glad I did. Dennis, thanks so much for spending the time with us, and we wish you the best of luck going forward. And we really appreciate it. A lot of good information here today. The fans will love it, and really wish you the best of luck going forward.
The pleasure is mine.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, the voice of hockey legends. Just a reminder to please consider giving the show a rating and or review on Apple Podcasts. The link is in the show notes. These ratings and reviews help us become a lot more visible and make the show more accessible to hockey fans everywhere. I personally read all the reviews and greatly appreciate them all. If you have thoughts or suggestions for the show, you can contact us through our website at prohockeyalumni.org, or be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Pro Hockey Alumni. Thanks for listening.